Ready for part two?
Ready.
When I came here tonight, I prayed that, anything that God doesn't want to change your brain, He wants to change your heart. And the only way He does that is heart to heart, spirit to spirit. And so, as I share some more of my story, you're going to identify with things in your own heart. You're going to identify where things have been stolen from you or touch on something. I'll encourage you that, I don't know how we'll play this out, I don't know what the Spirit will do, but when I hear about prayer nights and when I hear about places where you give room for Him to change you, I never understood, I didn't like Psalms for a good portion of my life because they seemed too flowery. I like Proverbs. It's like, give me the rules, man. This is it. I'm going to change. So I didn't understand because my heart could not see beauty. It had only known pain. And I could identify with pain and hard work and do that stuff. But to read a verse that says, He makes you lay down in green pastures. So kind of now, oh my gosh, slow down. You're not a human doing. You're my child. I want you to lay down with me and let me do surgery on you. I couldn't have done that years ago because I had no clue. How does He do that? So, I'll pick up the story because a few people have asked me if this is going to become a book at some point, and it probably will be because when people ask me, so you're in the ministry, how did you get there? What happens? Well, we're all in the ministry. Everybody's called. Francis of Assisi said it this way: all times, everywhere you can, preach the gospel. And if necessary, use words. What he's saying is your life becomes the message. Your life becomes the story. We know in Revelation it says that you overcome by the blood of the Lamb. You heard learning about the blood covenant. And the word of your testimony. And what's the last part? And that you did not love your life to death. In other words, you're not trying to save yourself. You're that free. You're that free. I just had one of my staff, who just became a Christian a few years ago, took him to Sierra Leone, take him around, and we were over in New Zealand here a few weeks ago doing a school of prophetic preaching, and he's asking God, is he called into this particular kind of thing? And he did a great job. He's the youngest person that's ever participated, because basically your life becomes a message, and when you don't have a lot of life yet, you can only share what you've known so far. And after he's done, the older people there were just like amazed. And his phone call comes in from his wife that he just found out his mom was given a month to live. So he flew back, and then she passed away this morning. And he sent me an incredible text for being, he's 27. And he goes, if it wasn't for the love of the Father, I don't think I could handle this, because I feel both grief and joy at the same time. Immature hearts think those things are separate, but they're not. You can actually experience it all. Because his heart now knows that she's healed. You can be healed on this side of eternity, but if not, you'll be healed on that side. Amen. And sometimes we're getting different perspective on what he's doing to us. So, but why I'm sharing this, what my life has become, is a message that has been culminated more in the last 4 or 5 years by this understanding, this revelation of God as Father. I read the verses, but I did not experience it. But I did not know that. I was just telling Cody, I said, you don't know what you don't know until you know. God knows everything about you, but you don't. When your heart is shaped from all his experiences, it affects everything and how you perceive all life to be. And so how we compensate is we live here. If our heart is orphaned, if it's not fully yet aware of who its maker is, I said this last week, then orphans will, how do they know their name? They don't know their name, so they have to create an identity. When I came last week, John handed me this and it has pastor on the front. And I tell everybody around me, don't call me that. Because I'll have to go, so what do? Jack? I'm an electrician. Well, electrician Bob. There's nowhere in Scripture, Jesus did not ask to be called anything. People call him all sorts of things, but he never tell them don't. And so here's what, I have met people in ministry that this is really important. Make sure you know who I am. Honor, we're brothers and sisters, and we all have roles. But I hope I'm not stepping on too many toes here, but because some of us have been trained in Christianity that there are certain things you're supposed to honor that literally are not written there, because love will always honor. You can honor and not love, but you cannot love and not honor. That's why love in 1 Corinthians, it says love does not dishonor, it always honors. How do I know? I'm just going to share a little thing here, but when you know how love is coming to you, the Bible says, be led in the Spirit, walk in the Spirit, live by the Spirit. The Spirit comes and it's what brings love to you. And what is the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5? It is love. Now we all know the 9, it's all listed there, but it says, in the right version, it says basically the fruit of, not the fruits of the Spirit, it says the fruit of the Spirit is love. It's Him. It's the essence of God. How does it manifest? In goodness, in kindness, gentleness, patience, the ability to suffer for long periods of time and not. Jesus showed us that. And self-control, the ability that, I want to rise up right now. Hang on. Wow, love is here. Wow. Love my enemy right now. When you run out of patience, when something triggers you, something pushes a button, what's happening is something is rubbing up against the scar tissue in your heart. And whoosh, and the patience gone. And you cannot pray for more patience. You cannot pray for more kindness. Those are manifestations of love. What you need is more love. That's why we say, oh, Holy Spirit, fill us. Keep on filling us. It's not a one-time thing. Keep on bringing your presence. And He's not out there we kind of look, just pour it out. I want to get to the place where rivers of living water flow out. This love just pours out. That's powerful. So, back to my story, just to give you a little bit of hope for your journeys and how He can break through any story. So here I am, 4 months of age, I'm in Germany, and my dad is now dead. I'm not aware of anything. This 20-pound laptop, this whole thing up here, it's not even cognitively processing yet. Children can't lie up into a certain age because they just don't understand why. There's no motive to try and trick or fool people because they're just pure. See, everything in our childhood, up to those first few years, everything we experience is love to us. It just defines us. That's what shapes our heart. And so all of a sudden, we don't even know some of the things. For example, all the women that were pregnant during 9/11 that lived in New York City at the time when those 2 towers came down. I was working downtown at the time in a tower, and I remember the moment where my staff called me into the boardroom and said, look what's going on, and here's the one building burning. Nobody knows what's going on. And we're watching, and all of a sudden this another plane banks around. You've seen the video, right? And hits the next building, and we're just like, what the? And the room exploded in tears and fear, and some people ran out. One guy went and took all his money out of the bank, and it was just crazy. What's incredible is the trauma. Those mothers that were pregnant at 9/11, those children are now, that was in 1999, 98 or something. So they're just about 20 years old now. And those kids have incredible challenges. because the fear and anxiety that that the mother felt, they picked it up in the womb. With no cognitive knowledge, they're just super sensitive. If anyone here has ever served in the military, you're hearing a lot now about PTSD, about the traumas that go on, and nobody was designed by God to live with stress, to live with the evil like this. And every time it affects us, that's why we've got to keep coming into his presence and letting him, quote, comfort us. This is really important that when Jesus said, someone greater is coming, he says, you won't be praying to me, you'll be praying to him in my name. You'll be in me, and you'll pray to the Father. And whatever you ask from within me, he'll give you. And he's going to send, we're going to send someone greater, a counselor, a comforter. Why do we need a comforter? Paul said it. I mean, he was a murderer. He was ISIS of his day. And when God breaks through his hard heart, 13 years on the backside of the desert, 3 years backside of the desert, 10 years in his hometown before he's, quote, back. And he writes to the Corinthians years later, he's the God of all comfort. He's a man that experienced a lot of comfort. Why was he so zealous to go kill Christians? 13 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, now we see that Christianity is growing, and he gets it on. Give me permission. I'll get rid of these guys. What's in his heart that he is so driven? It's very likely he'd been abused. Very likely he was treated with a great deal of religious edges and who knows what. But now God comforts him. And now, there's no Old Testament verse that I studied the Old Testament, so I'm going to write to you, Corinthians, about the nature of God. This came because he experienced it. He's the God of all comfort. Incredible stuff. There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Not a smidge. Here's a guy that murdered people, and he's free from self-debilitating, oh, I was such a bad guy. I said, oh, it's just, yeah. This is the freedom that Paul writes in Galatians. For freedom's sake, Christ set us free. The freedom, what's the freedom? The freedom to be exactly who you would be as if there had been no fall. And as if your heart hadn't been wounded. The uniqueness of us, the personality of who you are, is what brings joy to people. Brings life. But the enemy's he's a meaty. So, my quick story. 4 months of age, my mom, we moved back. We ended up in this city, and I'm farmed out to different families. 9 different elementary schools by the time I was in grade 4. One of the families gets arrested in the middle of the night. There's 2 twin girls, and they had a slave in the house. It was an 18-year-old boy. They treated like a slave. The adults never knew. And we as kids, we didn't know why they were so mean to this kid. But, that's just the way it was. I'm going to skip bits and parts in here, but I can remember the moment when the police came and arrested this couple for some credit card fraud. And I'm sitting there, and as kids, and they look at me and go, oh, there's an 18-year-old here. You guys are cool. And we had the best week of our lives. Craft dinner, hot dogs, stay up late. We didn't have any parents around. And my mom would drop me off on Sunday night and pick me up on Friday night. And I'd live with my mom on weekends and with these families. I had 13 mothers that God provided in that season. I had 7 fathers. That's a whole other story in itself. But here I am in grade 4, and now my mom comes to pick me up on a Friday night and say, hey, where's Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so? Oh, they got arrested on Monday. What? Got arrested? And she freaks out. What are we going to do? How are we going to take care of, and my teacher offers to take me in. Who wants to live with her? No. And he's got to do homework. So, bottom line was, this is where God did one of the most obvious things in my life. He already, at my dad's funeral, he spoke to my mom at the funeral. And people came from everywhere. He was young, so a lot of people came. And my mom had an awareness of God. But as the funeral's going on, all of a sudden this beam of light comes through the window, and she was drawn to get up from the front row and go up to this Anglican church and put her hand on the beam of light, and it was so hot she couldn't touch it. And the priest came over and the same thing happened, and then it was gone. And then God spoke to her. She didn't tell me that until I was 25, when I had come to faith, 26 or so, and she told me how God spoke to her about she was not to let me go with my dad's family who wanted to take me from her. Because they said, you can't take care of this baby, you have no means. We can, now, like I said, a lot of those families got taken out, a lot of drugs, a lot of issues. I'm sharing that because in your life, regardless of what you've experienced, He's there, working through to bring you, to show you His goodness. You don't see it because you don't know it yet. You're not quite aware of it, but your heart does. Your heart does. And so in grade 4, it was the neighbors across the street, a Christian family, that offered to take me in while my mom found means for me. And it was in that family that I was never with them on weekends, so I never experienced Sunday. They didn't talk about it. There was a girl that was my age, and she became my first kind of sister. And she was just really kind. There was such love in her in grade 4 that years later when I got into drugs, when I went to Vancouver to go make a big drug buying holiday, I looked her up. Hadn't seen her since grade 4. And I go, hey, Mary Lou, I'm in town. Want to hook up? Want to get together? Of course, you know what's going on in a young man's mind that doesn't know God. And she's beautiful, and she's full of life, and she's full of God. I don't know that. And we start talking, and somehow it comes up that she believes in God. And I went, oh, no, not you. You see, at that stage, I had started talking people out of their faith. I wasn't against God. There's no reason for Him to exist in my being. An invisible, you can't touch Him physically, you can't smell Him with your nose, you can't see Him with your eyes, you can't hear Him with your ears. There's the 5 sense knowledge. What is that saying? When you run into people that are that against God, it shows you how hard their heart is. The truth comes and it just bounces off. Because they've had to protect themselves, they've had to put up all this guard, and if it's got anything related to do with religion or God or anything as part of what they perceive it to be, oh my gosh. It's like scratching something that's just going to explode. And I was like that. Fortunately, I never got too abused growing up, but when someone would tell me about God, it would be like, are you kidding me? You can't touch it. Because when your heart's shut down, you have to live here. And so for me, it was just survival. Figuring out life. I'm going to be a good person, try to have fun, but I'm not going to, I was very quiet. So, fast forward, I move in with my mom, and she has female roommates, and so I grow up with all these roommates, and I have this one memory, it's one of my favorite memories, God brought it back to me about 3 years ago, of me waking up in bed with my mom, because I'm sleeping in her bed, I'm in grade 4, and I just remember her looking there, and she looked beautiful. She had this blonde hair, she was a wonderful lady, and I just felt this warmth. I had a memory of that for years. And 3 years ago, as God began to do more surgery in my heart, if you will, He says to me, do you remember that moment? I go, oh yeah, it's one of my favorite. I remember it. I can remember the smell, I can remember just feeling so safe. Because now I was actually there. It wasn't just, I'd been with her on weekends, but somehow I knew I was there now. I was finally home with her. And I'm in grade 4, and he says, why do you think that was such a positive memory? Now, God never asks you a question that doesn't have an answer that's in your heart that He wants you to actually experience. Because He wants to show that truth comes from inside of you, not from your here into here. It comes through you. This validates it. This helps for sure. But this is truth. He always works at the spirit level and works at the heart level, if you want. And so when you ask that question, why do you say, well, it was because da-da-da. And then He showed me It's the first time your heart, Brand, experienced nurturement in, I would have been, what, 9 years old in grade 4? In 9 years. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh. No wonder I've had blocked emotions. No wonder it's been a rough road for my wife at times when she's expecting this happy-go-lucky, the husband that's, oh, you're sick. Oh, you poor girl, let me get you. I never grew up, I never saw anyone sick. I never saw anybody give compassion. It wasn't, I didn't experience it. So how can you give away what you haven't experienced? My wife would say, well, the Bible says you should love your wife, and yeah, I better learn how to do this. And so I started to figure out Christianity here. I started to put it into action by being obedient to what it says. And you can get so far. You can change yourself to a certain degree, stop some habits, you might learn some new ones, but you cannot become free by you trying to make it so. Only He can do that. But He's so patient. You can never put Him in a box, but He'll come to any box to set us free. So, I am now living, my mom remarries, turns out he's a jerk, he pushes her around, he starts abusing her, and that ends within a few months. So stepfather number 1, he's gone within 4 months. Stepfather number 2 comes along, and he tries to be a good dad. He tries to actually teach me how to be a kid, and let's go fishing and all that stuff, and I just, why? I can't receive love. See, your heart is designed to be nurtured and loved. And when it doesn't get it, you have to then figure out where to get it. And so you go to false comforts. You'll go to places. You'll try and manufacture it. You'll find all the falsities you can. It's just what happens. And so for me, years later, I'm on my drug buying holiday. My buddies and I, we start partying together. You don't know who you are, so you just try and figure out life. You try and stimulate. You try and get excited, you try and do things, and so for me it was slowly trying to figure that out. And we made a pact, we're going to get high every day for a year. I mean, if they had made marijuana illegal back then, we would have been the first guys out there going, shit. It's so funny now, I can tell you hundreds of stories, it seems like, where I've helped people burn all their paraphernalia and just get clean of all that stuff as God frees them from needing that as a way to, quote, comfort the pain. When He's there, you don't need the stuff. And so, what's crazy though for me, I get on the road, drive to Vancouver, meet the girl, Mary Lou, she was in grade 4. Hey, oh no, you believe in God? No, not you, you're too nice. I can't, all the people I've met suck green persimmons and have this kind of weird attitude, and I'm free, baby. Like, you should come and join my party. I could convince almost every Christian I met to give up their faith. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know God existed. I just saw them as being religious, and they were actually quite religious, and they were so not full of life. And they'd experienced life, and I thought I was doing them a great deal. But her, I said, look, you can't believe in Him. Yeah. But I said, you can't see Him, touch Him, smell Him, taste Him, feel Him. It doesn't exist. And she goes, oh, well, He does. He answers prayer. Yeah, right. Give me an example. Well, I wanted to go out with my friends on this camping trip, and I prayed, and I had a check in my spirit. I said, a what in your what? I felt God say, don't. So I didn't. I said, hold it. You wanted to do this. This is your friends, but you felt some mystical sense that, yeah. He says, they go out, and it was in the wintertime, and the cabin they were staying in burnt down. They were all caved, all their stuff burned out. They had to walk out in the snow. Some of them got frostbite. And he goes, see? He protected me. I really wanted to go, but He knew what was better for me, so I trust Him. She had a real relationship with God. She wasn't just going through the motions. And I didn't know. I go, oh, that's a coincidence. Now I know what a coincidence is. It's something that God's doing in your life that you don't really know it's Him yet. So we have a word for it. It's either Him or the enemy. But if you're in Him, God says, I will never allow you to be tested beyond what you can handle tempted. I will always give you a way of escape. I just didn't know what that way was. After I became a Christian, I thought, well, you got to try hard. The way of escape is him. It's lay down in green pasture and say, I'm feeling this incredible temptation to do X, Y, Z. Can you get to the root of what is it in me, what is it about your love that I don't yet know, that if I did know it, this would be like... That's what he's looking for. That broken and contrite heart that's crying out to him. Just search me, see what I'm cleanly. And you know I don't. I love this. I wish I'd known this 30 years ago. So here I am. I'm going to give you the real quick conclusion. So that girl goes back to her church and has me pray. Puts my name on a list. And they will pray for people every day for a year. I didn't know that till 5 years later. That next summer, instead of my girlfriend, my first real, oh, someone likes me. Do you want to move in together? Let's go become bartenders. I was a big ski guy. Let's go to Penticton. And she's like, maybe. And I get a phone call to go up to northern Alberta. And who do I meet at a barbecue? Is another girl. And I'm hitting on her. I can be honest, right? That was many years ago. My wife was like, and she goes, I have a boyfriend. I said, well, what does he do? He goes to Bible school. And I went, oh, no. You go out with a guy that goes to a school that studies an old book? Are you, like, I was just pushing, right? And she's like, no, he's like another one of these full of the Spirit, full of love, not trying to. And I'm like, okay, we're done. And the northern lights come out behind her. And I'm like, and I know my spirit goes, this is something's wrong. And I'm done. I got to look for someone I can score some paraphernalia off of. We're done. First day of the job. And I see this guy come in on a big motorbike, chopped hair, long hair, beautiful girl on the back seat. They both had same handmade leather jackets. And I'm like, there's my people. I got to go. And she goes, well, I'm just visiting. She goes, if you ever want to talk more about God, you can talk. And she points at them. And I'm like, what? No way. Christians have short hair, and they suck green persimmons, and they don't have motorbikes. And they don't. And so I avoid them. But she talks to him. He comes over and says, would you like to come back to my house? I'm just going to pick up my guitar and playing at the he's this ex-rock and roll guy from Toronto that at 16 had everything until God showed up in his life. Been to a teen challenge, and he was just full of love, and this is his wife. They've been married 10 years. And I come into their house, and everything's the coolest thing. He's got the guitars that are just amazing. And he says, hey, if you're here for the next 4 months, man, I'll teach you how to play, and you can ride the motorbikes, and you can hang out with us. And I'm like, this is awesome. Except they had a Bible open on their coffee table. And I'd never seen a Bible open before. And it was scribbled in and colored, and things were... And I looked at it, and I said, hey, if we're going to be friends for the next 4 months, you can't talk about that. Because you're kind of nice people. I wouldn't want to have to talk you out of it. How arrogant and how hard-hearted. And they looked at each other, didn't say a word. They went, yeah. And they didn't. They didn't try to convert me. What they did is they loved. John chapter 13 says that the love that you have for one another is how the world will know. How does the world know God's real? That he is love, and when it manifests through his children, when you experience love, whoa. And they did that. Like, they became, I'd never seen a married couple before. I never lived in a home where a marriage was like this. And this gets really funny, but he'd come home from work, and she'd be there, and he'd come out, and I'd be there, and he'd just go, hey, Pookie Wookie Bear, I so missed you. You're just so, I don't know, like, ah. On one side, the other side's going, ah. You can do that? I thought you had to be cool and have it all together. And, and he's being this childlike. And she goes, oh, Pookie Wookie Bear, I missed you too. And I'm like, ah. But you go through that for a few weeks, and my heart is starting to experience for the first time in the presence of people. They weren't trying to do it to me, per se. They were doing it to one another, and I am like feeling it. When we talk about anointing or the presence of God, it's love. God doesn't show up and beat on you and get you to try and change. He loves you. It's the kindness of God that leads us into metanoia, repentance, where we turn from this to this. We turn to love. Once you start seeing love, you can't unsee it.
That's right.
Once you experience it, you can't go back. Now, you might get fooled from time to time and go, no, he's not really. The devil may show up and go, if you really are one of his kids, if he really is a loving God, then why don't you do that? How come he hasn't come through for you? Where's the thing you've been praying for? What he's testing is you don't really fully know his goodness yet. Long story short, real quick, it takes 3 years. 3 years. I'm supposed to go back to school and leave that job, and in comes Chris, and he sits on my bed. I got all my drug paraphernalia, I got my magazines all around me, I got all my false comforts surrounding me. And I had started asking them questions. I said, how is it that you guys can do this? They go, what do you mean? Well, the way you treat each other, the way you, quote, love each other is just sickeningly, but it's interesting to me. How do you do that? And they said, you won't like the answer. What are you talking about? Well, you told us not to talk about our faith. And he says, look, our love that we have for one another is because you first loved us. And when we stay in that, it causes us to be selfless instead of selfish. We're not perfect at it. We have our dust ups, but it's not. But we choose to go back there, and I'm like, you're right. I don't have any clue what you just said. He sits on my bed that one day, and I'm supposed to come back to Calgary, and he says, Heather and I kept our word, our promise to you, and I forgot about it. We haven't told you about our faith. We haven't tried to tell you about that. And so we think, God's got something up for you, but we think you should do one thing. We think you should try and disprove the existence of God. And whatever answer you come to, live your life full on. Now, I didn't know that they knew that God was coming after my heart. There was no church in the town. This is a small town up north. There was no Sunday thing, but there was a family of God, and they would meet in home. And I'm sitting there going, I could do that. That would be easy to do. I could do that. But what's going on is my heart is going, I could stay for a few more months. I could be around them. I can make a little bit more money. And so I stayed. And I started doing some research. And I am shocked to find out that every major scientist in the world that started the scientific branches had a faith. I was like, what? No, this is ridiculous. And then I went, okay, if there's a possibility of a creative force, I couldn't use the word God, if there's a possibility of a creative force in the universe, how would he interact with people? Well, religions say they all have a different view, so I'll study them. I won't look at the bathwater. The bathwater is really messy in Christianity. A lot of things have been done in the name of God that have nothing to do with him. Think about this. People have gone to war in the name of Jesus, and Jesus loved your enemies. He didn't say go fight them. All the stuff that's been done in human history to tarnish. So I bathwater, throwing that out, I'm going to look at the baby. So I looked at Muhammad, I looked at Joseph Smith, who was Mormonism, Taze Russell, which was Jehovah's Witness, Christ, obviously for Christianity. And I looked at them all, and the craziest thing is they all point to Jesus. Even Muhammad, there's more verses in the Quran about Jesus than there is about Muhammad. And you're like, what the heck? So finally I found a guy that was just like me, doing the same thing. He'd written a book on, and you get to this place, it says, so Jesus was either a liar, that he was just trying to convince people he was the Son of God, because he was an egotist, or he was a freaking lunatic. He was actually insane thinking he was. I mean, there's some people out there that think they're God. or he was who he said he was, Son of God. See, Jesus only gave himself 3 names. Some say 4. Son of Man, Son of God, Son of David, Son of Joseph. Son. With the relationship thing going on here? I check this out and I go, oh my gosh. If there's a possibility that there's a God and he's created all this, and he's created me, oh no, that means there could be a reason for me. And that scared me. Because I had no clue what that was. No clue. What in the heck are we doing on this planet? Who am I and why am I here? I don't know if you thought about those things, but they're deep in our hearts. Who am I? What am I here to do? What am I just taking up air and water? But he's designed you. He's got giftings inside you and callings. So I'll end with this little part of the story. Long story short, go back to the city, walked into my first church. Took a year. I became a Christian 3 years after that process started. And I'm in a camp job. Many people were killed. I was the only Christian. And lots of things happened. And God would teach me every day. All I had to do was pick this out. And I now realize what he was doing. He said, the Holy Spirit will teach you everything you need to know. And there were certain verses I didn't get. But there was nobody teaching. There was no fivefold ministry around or anything like that. And when I would get really questioned, I wonder if you're really here. This is like getting awkward. All of a sudden a grizzly bear would stand up with that coffee pot. Is that close to me? Just stand up and look at me. And for the next 20 years, God would use animals to come into my life and comfort me. Now remember, that's all I had growing up. There was no siblings, there was no parents. I couldn't trust people in terms of them being conduits of comfort. The reason why it took me so long to believe God existed is because he's a father, and I did not have a good father. I didn't have a father. The 2 fathers I did have. The other part that I didn't know about was that my mother abandoned me for a while. I did not know that. Until, fast forward, I'll just jump through a bunch of years. I come back, go to this church. I've been in 3 churches my entire life. And I just know that I don't pick him. He just puts me there. He says he puts the lonely in families in Psalm 68. He's a father to the fatherless. I didn't know that. I just found myself doing that. The first church I'm in, within a couple of years, they asked me to come on staff. I'm a new Christian. I don't know anything about churchianity. And fortunately, they couldn't pay us, and we had our first baby, and it was just, I was so mad at God. Look at how messy this is. And he says, you're talking about my bride. Well, your church, they're so blah, 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 blah. And he goes, whose church? I go, your church, it's yours. They're just a... What had happened was they had started touching on some of my wounds, some of those scar tissue. And I was just like, come on, you're supposed to be all loving. And the third time he says to me, who's the church? When God speaks to your heart, you'll never forget it. He asks the question, who's the church? Not whose church. And I went, oh my gosh, the church isn't a building. It's not a denomination. It's not a thing that gathers on Sunday for a couple hours, 2% of your work hours. It's his family, and you're part of it. Oh my gosh, tuck the tail between my legs, go back and realize that he has me in this. I last there for a bit, into the corporate world for 13 years. God does more work, draws me back. I tell my story on the university campus, and God says, that's where I want you to go next. And at 38 years of age, I walked in with my wife and my 3 kids, and we were the oldest people. And now we're just, and the best thing of all, we had no clue how to do church. We had to trust and let the Spirit lead us. And where he led us into healing. He led us into how to start getting the heart healed. And that was good for me, because guess what? Your life becomes, I'm the hood ornament. I'm just breaking wind. I get to go first. Then he shows us this revelation. But in the midst of it, right in the middle of it, I'm burnt out. I'm done. I'm going home. I can't do anything more. I think my wife's upset with me. My kids are upset with me. I think the church should all leave. I can't hear God. I can't feel him anymore. What's going on? Now I know when that happens, he's trying to get your attention. My neighbor comes, we do a Stampede breakfast, comes over. She brings over her dad, and somehow the story of my dad's death comes up. And she goes, this sounds familiar to me. I go, nobody knew him. I didn't know anyone who knew him because my mom had to keep me from all of his family. And this guy, her dad, comes over and says, hi, I'm just visiting, but I knew your dad. A lot of people knew him. The Army is a very tight fraternity. There is a lot